Good morning, everyone. Welcome to all of our participants and honored guests. Thank you for joining us for part two of our Black Women in Leadership Forum. Today, we will keep Black women at the center and continue our conversation regarding Black women in leadership. Thank you to our presenting sponsor, RBC, for your support. In our first session on Friday, October 30th, we were very moved and inspired by the stories of esteemed Black women leaders. Her Honor, Dr. Mayanne Francis, Yvonne Atwell, Barbara Manning, Sharon Davis Murdoch, and Cora Tolliver. We are so pleased to have them join us again today. Each of these leaders showed up and generously offered insight into the challenges they have faced and the challenges they continue to face as leaders. They also imparted strategies and resources to help overcome these obstacles with courage and wisdom to inform the way forward. We listened and we learned what is needed to improve the experience of Black women leaders and to empower more Black women to rise up into their leadership. During our breakout sessions, you identified strategies and challenges and presented a number of questions. Based upon the questions and the comments that you shared with us last week, a number of common themes did, in fact, evolve. Today, in our second session, we will use the learning from the stories, the questions, and discussions to understand how we can collaborate and take action to change the landscape for Black women in leadership. We are very grateful this morning to host highly respected senior decision makers from both private and public sectors who will share their thoughts on the stories that they have heard, and they will kindly respond to a few questions. We will discuss what work is being done to improve the experiences of Black women leaders and explore what their organizations can do to make significant and lasting change. Before we get started, I would like to just highlight a few housekeeping notes. I'd like to ask if you please don't mind to mute the sound on your microphones during the session. Please feel free to write your comments and questions in the Zoom chat box throughout our time this morning. As time permits, we will be drawing from your questions after our panel discussion. The chat will go direct to Sherry Hodds, who will make sure that I receive your questions. Both of these sessions, with the exception of the breakouts, will be recorded in order to share the learning after our forum. We are so pleased to welcome back Kathy Martin for our opening prayer. Kathy is a member of the Millbrook Mi'kmaq Band and Dalhousie University's Director of Indigenous Community Engagement. Welcome, Kathy.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you, Kathy.
Hey, everything's working today. It must be Friday.
Wonderful. Good morning.
It's a beautiful day, and I welcome all of you today to our gathering, but also to the land of my ancestors, the Olnu, and we know us today, the Mi'kmaq. I've lit a smudge because I think this is such a special time that we light our and I drum brings our minds together and our hearts together as one to do the work that we are wanting to do. And I call those who've gone before us when I drum to come and help us today. And the heartbeat is for us to all remember that beautiful place we lived inside our mother's womb. And this was her language that she taught us. So we know that here in Mi'kmaq, it's important we always speak the truth, which is the truth, the language of our mother, the heartbeat. And when we speak the truth, we all understand, because we all understand this language that our mother gave us. The drum beat also helps us sort of get time in and bring our heart down to the that it's supposed to be, so we can speak our truths from our hearts. Walaliok and Nogma.
Thank you so much, Kathy. That was wonderful. We really appreciate that. We're very excited to continue our conversation from last week to understand what actions senior decision makers are already taking and what more we can do to collaborate to change the landscape for both present and future Black women leaders. Joining us today for our discussion are esteemed panelists. Dr. Theresa Rajack-Talley, the inaugural Vice Provost for Equity and Inclusiveness at Dalhousie University. Vivek Sood, Executive Vice President of Related Businesses for Sobeys Inc. and Chair of the Sobeys Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council. Ronald, Regional President, Atlantic Canada at RBC, and Nancy Chahwan, Chief Human Resources Officer at the Treasury Board of Canada Secretariat. Welcome to all of you, and thank you so very much for taking time from your busy schedules to be with us this morning. Before we get into asking the panelists a few questions, I'd like to begin by asking each of you to give us a brief sense of how you received the first session of the forum and what you are thinking about right now in your role with regard to Black women in their leadership And please feel free to speak from your perspective and of your respective organizations. So I'd like to say that we will go in the following order. We'll begin with Theresa, and then Vivek will follow, and then Chris, and then Nancy, and then we'll begin with a few questions. So if we could begin by inviting Theresa.
Good morning.
Good morning.
First, I'd like to thank the organizers for hosting this important two-day event and for considering me as a panelist. Second, I would like to thank the Black women who presented last week in their roles as leaders, mentors, and griots. Their accounts and personal stories, analyses, perspectives, and intellectual thoughts were compelling and inspiring, and they were also very relatable. In my 5 minutes, I'm going to talk about my experience, observations, and research on Black women leaders. I had discussed this at a similar forum in the US and a paper that I wrote called "We Do Not Have to Be White or Men to Lead." What I talk about in this paper is that Black women have leadership styles that are invisible, not recognized, and unique. I say invisible because if you look throughout the histories of our countries, throughout all the social movements, civil rights, Black power, women movement, and so on, we see women playing important roles, but they're seen for their organizational skills. We make things happen, and we still do. We are head of committees, we are head of organizations, church groups, and so on. But we are viewed as fixers. Women are fixers, they're not leaders. And when we do step up to the plate and we exhibit quiet strengths and leadership skills, we are seen as weak. If we step up to the plate and are more vocal and front, we are seen as divas. These characteristics are not viewed in the same way as males. We have a long history of women through Caribbean and American Black women. Last week, we saw that of the Honorable Dr. Mayan Francis, Yvonne Apple, Barbara Manning, John Davis Murdoch, Cora Tolliver, and you yourself, Crystal. All these styles of leadership and what I've observed in my own mom, my aunt, my grandmother, the women that work around me have informed my style of leadership, which I call Black women's leadership. But when we even try to make this visible, it's not recognized. For example, when I became chair of my Black Studies department, I was sent to a conference, a workshop for all chairs across North America. And we went around introducing ourselves and our styles of leadership. Of course, it was white male dominated, and they all portrayed what their style of management they were doing, former chairs, even their fathers. When it came to me, I said, I adopt and will use a Black woman's style of leadership. The room was silent. And interesting, throughout the whole conference, nobody was curious enough to ask me what I meant. So I dug further into that and I started looking at what is this Black woman's style of leadership, because I realized at some point I'll have to explain it to interested people like yourselves. So what I found is that our styles of leadership are different for men and whites, primarily because we operate within structures and systems and organizations and cultures steeped in patriarchy and racism. Now, what does this look like? It has created our resilience as Black women, but there are particular characteristics that I've also found. One, there are four that I've identified. They're interactive and they're not exhaustive. First one that I want to just briefly mention is that our styles of leadership include resisting marginalization and silencing. It's because we have no choice, we operate within these structures and we always have to do this. And we do this because we know we must. We must in order to survive, to be successful, and for our families and communities to survive and be successful. It's interesting that the strong Black woman stereotype emerges from this resilience and lack and resisting marginalization and silencing. But from my observation and research and experience, women are Black women are not one of the phenotype. that gives us this image or characteristics. We are socialized into these roles. And a lot of the conversations last week, the women talked about how they were socialized and how they had to step up to resist marginalization and silencing. The other thing that was strong last week, and I also had identified as one of the characteristics, is we tend to utilize what I call the participatory approach in leadership. That includes mentorship and empowering others, which is different from traditional patriarchal styles of leadership that tends to create dependency on the leader. We try to empower others as we move along. The third characteristic is that we incorporate intersectionality because that's who we are. We cannot separate on one characteristics of ours from the other, and plus we cannot separate our personal and professional life. So we tend to, including ourselves of leadership, address the issues of racism, economic justice, gender inequality, and we focus on family, sexuality, and community. And sometimes we often blame for doing that. We look to bonus weak, family makes us weak, whereas family with men makes them strong. And last but not least, we always engage in community development. We realize that it is important for us to alter the economic, intellectual, cultural, and social capital of not only ourselves and our families, but of our community. I do have some recommendations for administrators and institutions and for Black women and women of color that I'll probably address during the question time, just to keep in my 5 minutes, Crystal, and following instructions. Thanks.
Teresa, thank you so much. I really appreciate you sharing those words. Very interesting research and study. So we're going to move right along and invite Vivek to share, take a few moments to share.
I would also like to say what an absolute privilege and pleasure it is to be here. And thank you so much for including me on this panel. You know, I have to say last week, it was just inspiring. I had heard most of the panelists speak in other capacities, but the passion and hear the stories, it was just, I was just so pleased to be able to attend and hear this. Just a little bit about me. I am, you know, I've been with the Sobeys for 20 plus years, and I'm an operator in my background, but the most proud day at Sobeys for me was when I was asked to chair a diversity, equity, and inclusion council. The reason why is my family and I immigrated to Nova Scotia from East Africa in 1969, and we were multi-generational in Africa, and moved directly to Stellarton, Nova Scotia. And that journey was quite quite a change for us. However, it was a wonderful change for us. And my family still lives in Pictou County, and there's a number of reasons for that. But I think when I talk about what I heard last week and what really was the most inspiring messages, it ties a little bit into our journey. And you know, the first message that came clear to me was the importance of inclusion. The second was the importance of mentoring and support. And lastly, hearing the stories and the challenges that were overcome, it just reinforced my mind. It's time for change. We need to be better, and I'm talking about Sobeys. In this area, we've acknowledged it. We've acknowledged we've had our issues in the past, but we're committed to change. And those aren't just words. I'm very proud of the fact that, you know, from the Sobeys family, from our board of directors, from our executive team, which I'm part of, this is not a discussion. This is a plan we're putting in place. We're done with with figuring out what's the best thing to do. We're putting a plan in place. We know we have to be bold. We understand that by going fast and being decisive, you may not get it all right, but that's okay, because you can learn from your mistakes and continue to improve. It really was the inclusion piece. And I know when one particular comment that Barbara made about being asked to join a board, however, not feeling necessarily included in the board itself, and feeling like she was welcome there. That's disheartening. And I got to be honest, I think when 5-6 years ago, when maybe we first started having hiring approaches and recruitment, the reason we attracted great people and lost them is because perhaps inclusion was not as well, I guess, the focus as it should have been. And we're changing that. 70% of all of our leaders in our organization have gone through unconscious bias training and inclusion training to truly understand what that means. We're also had a strong focus on listening and learning, and again, just even from last week and beyond that, listening and learning to those wonderful leaders, those experienced leaders who have trailblazed and have seen what needs to be done. We don't have that capability in a lot of our organizations. We need to hear from experts. We need to hear from our employees, from the Black women leaders in our organization. What are the challenges they're experiencing? Where do we need to put focus? And those conversations have been enlightening. They truly have. And we have a lot more to do. I'm proud of what we've done in a very short period of time, but make no mistake, we are at the beginning. And it has to go faster, and it has to be paramount to everything we do as an organization. We're looking at diversity, equity, and inclusion as equally important as our purpose, as our corporate purpose. Everything we need to do has to be looked through in the lens of what does it mean from a diversity, equity, and inclusion perspective. And by the way, not only we're not doing this because of what the environment is right now, or what we think is the right thing. We'll be a better organization. We know what Black women leaders have brought to our organization in other underrepresented communities within our organization. We know that if we want to be the best, most innovative and thoughtful company, we need that diversity of perspective. We need that to truly be innovative. And our commitment is to have the best of the best. And we haven't done that. We haven't done that because of unconscious bias. We haven't done that because we have not included exceptional young leaders, exceptional leaders. And we're absolutely committed to that change. And the support and mentoring. It's not enough to recruit. It's not enough to attract. It's mentoring, it's ongoing mentoring, it's ongoing support. This is not an initiative. This is not a project. This is a true culture change. And that has to be our focus. So I'm not sure if that was 5 minutes, Crystal, but I really do appreciate the chance to express my thoughts on this so important issue.
Vivek, thank you so much for those comments. I really appreciate your honesty and your openness, and recognizing that, Sobeys isn't perfect. No organization is perfect. Everybody's on the continuum trying to get the work done of advancing and infusing diversity and inclusion into their organization. And it's not easy work, but I applaud you for your leadership and thank you for your honesty and recognizing that Sobeys will be better for the work you're doing with EDI. It's going to be an advantage for your business. So that's something that a lot of leaders must recognize, that you're not doing a favor for Black women, but Black women are doing a favor for the organization and enhancing your business and the services that you provide to your customers. So thank you so much for sharing your words. So we will move on to Chris. Ronald, Over to you, Chris.
Great. Thanks very much, Crystal. Hopefully you can hear me okay and see me.
Yes, we can, and we can see you. Great.
Perfect. So thank you very much for the opportunity to be involved in this critical discussion, both corporately and as presenting sponsor of the two sessions, and personally here today as a panelist. This topic is important to me as a leader, as well as an individual, and to RBC as Canada's largest bank and largest company. And we're one of the largest employers in this region. We've got the ability, and I believe we've got a responsibility to be leaders in diversity and inclusion. Some people would know that I moved to Atlantic Canada from Toronto 2 years ago, and one of the first things that I did was get to know our team. I visited every single one of our branches. We've got 113 branches through Atlantic Canada, from Edmundston, New Brunswick to Happy Valley, Goose Bay. I spent a huge amount of time on the road, and there was so much that impressed me, including the representation of women in our branch leadership roles. And as I met more senior employees, I continued to be impressed. We had good representation of women in commercial banking vice president roles, which is something that we struggled organizationally. Commercial has historically been a male-dominated field. And when I looked at my team, my direct and dotted line reports, the regional vice presidents, 5 of the 10 were women. Plus the leader at our Global Shared Services Center, which is in Bedford, and who oversees 300 employees, was female. And just after arriving, I appointed a woman to head up our commercial banking business for the entire region, which would be one of the more senior roles. Certainly would be the second most senior role with RBC in Atlantic Canada. So my first observation was that our leadership team was more than 50% women, and which I thought was fantastic. And I thought we were doing well from a diversity perspective. And I think in many ways we were, and we had made lots of progress. And I knew this was recognized in the community, because a year into my tenure, I was asked to speak at the Elevate Atlantic Canada conference, which is part of the Elevate Women Initiative. But my second observation was that we were very white. In fact, at the regional VP level, it was 100% white. And this didn't sit well with me, and I asked and wanted to know why. And I took it as an opportunity to do some exploring. And I asked my leadership team, and the responses varied, with the most common being is that we don't have any Black candidates in our hiring pipeline. And while that may have been true, I also knew that Nova Scotia had the largest Indigenous Black population in the entire country. And so how come we didn't have any in our pipeline? And I wanted a perspective closer to the source. So I talked to our Black employees. I also talked to a number of Black clients and community leaders, some of which are with us today, such as Candace Thomas, the Honorable Mayan Francis, and Rustam Southwell, and all of whom gave me great advice. I got curious. I learned about the history of Blacks in Nova Scotia. And to be honest, it became a passion to learn more. And I wish I could tell you that I got a silver bullet, but I didn't. I learned a ton. And, like Vivek, we've made strides. But one of the main reasons I wanted to speak at and sponsor this event was, yes, to share our learnings, but I would suggest that we've got a ton to learn from each of you, because the way it stands today, the status quo at RBC, and certainly the status quo at RBC in Atlantic, for me is not okay. And if we're truly going to wear the title of being Canada's most diverse employer, then we need to create an environment here in Atlantic that is welcoming and respectful for everyone, and especially for Black people. And RBC's stated purpose is to help clients thrive and communities prosper. And we share that, we live and we breathe it every day, but that needs to include Black clients and our Black communities, and that is inside and outside of RBC. I've had the great fortune of working in a ton of different roles in over 30 years at the bank, and you can see that with my graying hair. And I've seen various strategies to increase the number of women in leadership. And I think some of those learnings certainly can be applied to increasing the number of Black women in leadership and Black employees in general. And it's not a numbers game, and I'm not driving to increase our percentages simply for the purpose of reaching a target. Putting people in a role simply to check a box doesn't set them, our clients, or our businesses up for success. So if I go back to our employees and clients and business leaders, while they didn't provide a silver bullet, they certainly gave us a ton of valuable feedback. which allowed us to start building an action plan, and a plan that, among other things, included deepening our relationships and commitments with our current partners, like the Black Cultural Center and Black Business Initiative, Business is Jamming. But I'll be honest, that plan felt like it was a little slow. It was in first gear, but that all changed with the George Floyd tragedy, at which point it shifted really into fifth gear. The tragedy helped me take the monkey off of my back, trying to make progress on my own. And I was able to get my entire team behind making a difference and making change. I knew that our employees were going to be key to us breaking the systemic racism that exists inside our own four walls. And I immediately convened Black employee discussion groups across the 4 Atlantic provinces. And one of their first requests to me was to create a forum in which their voices could be heard. And almost overnight, the Atlantic Black Action Committee within RBC was born, which is within just Atlantic Canada. And it's now 100 members strong. And if you count the allies, it's twice that size. And I'm proud to say that a few of our members are here at the conference today. And what was really amazing about the first time we got together as a team was the appreciation of knowing who our own Black employees were, because we didn't even know that. So we've now as well quadrupled the investment we're making into organizations that serve Black communities. And a few examples include the PLANS program through the Dartmouth General Hospital, the Black Internship Program with Neptune Theatre. We're looking at how we're recruiting and hiring, creating internships. We've removed barriers to identify Black female talent earlier and put the supports in place, such as mentoring programs, which I think is so critical, which came out loud and clear from the first session to ensure the candidate's success. And we're acknowledging our unconscious bias and microaggression actions, and there's certainly that has come out loud and clear. We're looking at ways to engage and leverage our fantastic employees in our efforts, and some early wins and the beginnings of a solid plan for sure, but we absolutely need to keep this moving. And again, that's why we're here today, for sponsoring, speaking, and learning from this event. So thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
That's great, Chris. Thank you so much. I appreciate your opening remarks as well. So we're going to move right along, and we're going to invite Nancy to please bring her opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Crystal, and good morning to all. Bonjour de Montréal. Je suis très heureuse d'être avec vous. I'm both honored and humbled, frankly, to be part of this event, and I really commend the organizers for this and the sponsors. I missed last Friday's conversations, but Paul Pierre, who's a member of the team in my office, has told me about that, and I can assure you that I have had several conversations in the last few weeks with Black women in my own organization and across the public service, and heard about their own experience and heard about what they would like us to turn our attention to. So I really look forward to the questions and answers after we speak. And one thing comes out for me quite clearly when I hear those testimonies. My gut reaction is always, this is not us. This cannot be us, but it is. It is. So we absolutely, the call to action could not be better heard and louder heard. I could this morning more or less legitimately start this conversation by telling you that the public service, the federal public service, is more diverse than it's ever been. And frankly, we have numbers well above the benchmarks for most of our equity-seeking groups. And this work has been propelled by leadership over the last 2 decades or so, propelled by the Employment Equity Act, the Canadian Human Rights Act. Of course, if I tell you that, I would be hiding the fact that this overall success hides inequities. Because as we start getting better data and disaggregated data, we now see much more clearly where the inequities lie, in which occupational groups, at which levels of the organization, in which regions across Canada. The equity-seeking employees report higher perceptions than the rest of respondents to our annual survey of discrimination and harassment. And that is a very, very real experience. and a daily experience in many cases. I personally, this is personal for me. It's not just about my role as a leader or even more so as a CHRO, but this is quite personal. I myself belong to multiple minorities. I'm an immigrant to this country. I'm a woman in senior ranks. I'm a Francophone, and I'm a member of a visible minority. I'm educated elsewhere, so the way I will behave or express myself may be different from the mainstream. So I understand firsthand the need for change, the systemic barriers. I have lived them and understand them rationally. And this, I think, puts the onus on me as somebody who has made it, quote unquote, to the senior ranks to really make a difference and open the path for others. Competence would not have been enough for me to have achieved the career path I have. It took people who believed in me, who spoke for me, including men and white men. So I hope we have men in the audience, and that would signal that they understand the issue and want to contribute. We spoke about the need to make a change, and what we are doing is, I will share a few things that want to advance the results, the outcomes, increase the inclusion, but also increase the pace at which we must achieve that progress. And there is a lot to be done, but at the same time, I can tell you, I've never felt as hopeful for the promise of change as I do now, because at all levels of the organizations, I can tell you this is palpable. And to the Black women present with us this morning, I want to say we hear your stories, we see your determination, we feel your resilience, and today we certainly heed your call for action. These words may spur some sarcasm or cynicism. We've heard this before, why today? But I do want to underscore the importance of this moment, and especially for the federal public service. There is an unprecedented sense of urgency for action and the need to see progress. The clerk of the Privy Council, who's also the head of the public service, the president of the Treasury Board, who is the employer of the more than 250,000 employees, the government itself have articulated their commitment in unequivocal terms. And this is really a sign of the awareness that we must set the bar as high as we can as the biggest employer in Canada. Diversity and inclusion are articulated as very, very firm commitments by all the parties I've just named. The guiding question for this panel is really about working together to change the landscape. And I have a great quote from Lila Watson, who's an Indigenous Australian artist and author. And she said, if you have come to help me, you're wasting your time. But if you recognize that your liberation and mine are bound together, we can walk together. We want to walk together. Black employees, Indigenous employees, and other equity-deserving members of the public service as we continue to co-design and co-develop solutions. We live in a digital time, in a digital world, and we've all heard about the digital revolution, user experience, design thinking. But as one of my good friends and colleagues, Zabin Yerji, says, the future is human. Co-development is at the center of how the Treasury Board Secretariat and my office are leading the work on diversity and inclusion, which means creating policies and programs with the people that the policies will apply to, for the programs that will be launched to assist in helping them find their space and their voice in the public service, listening to their lived experience and allowing it to influence the policies and the programs. It is far from just being consulted. It is being at the table. I have appointed the Black woman executive director, Paulanie Pierre, who's with us today and was there on Friday, to lead the new Center on Diversity and Inclusion and the work with the various communities. Her knowledge, her experience are very important because my office helps set the direction for the diversity and inclusion for the whole public service. But there's many, many enabling organizations all across, about 90 other departments and agencies. One stream of action will not be enough. We will have to work on different levels and on different streams. And the research shows that systemic barriers actually exist and are embedded at multiple levels of legislation, policy, initiatives, programs, behaviors, attitudes. We do want to start by generating the right data. We do not know very precisely who the public service is yet. And having the numbers means we know where the people are that we're trying to serve and assist, and that we are developing the right solutions for recruitment, for talent management, and increasing the diversity in senior leadership. But most of all, we're on a journey to change the hearts and the minds, because no matter how we change the rules, the decisions are made by humans. And to achieve that, as much as laws and policies are important to signal the intention, to set the ambition, it will absolutely not be as effective as allowing people's voices to be heard, learning and acting. And to this end, we're establishing a platform where the diverse public servants can share their stories, share their experiences, to raise that awareness and normalize and destigmatize the conversations about sensitive topics. And we acknowledge that this will not be comfortable, and we need to allow people to express themselves and react to the stories in sometimes awkward ways without raising more resistance. But we need to talk about topics like racism, homophobia, harassment, discrimination very openly and address them respectfully. We're very committed, as I said, to having an inclusive public service and to making sure that everybody feels fulfilled, that they have a voice. Our public service employment survey tells us that harassment and discrimination are the #1 stress factor for Black employees and the #1 career barrier for them. We know that Black employees have told us that they trust senior leadership, there is support for career development, but they don't feel to the same level as the rest of the public service that ideas are valued, that they have opportunities to provide that input. And we cannot talk about inclusion if we are not allowing them to be at the table, but more than that, if they don't see how their ideas are being carried forward. So sharing those experiences, hearing their voices is important. We need to go a bit further, much further. We need to be able to identify and sponsor the many talented Black women managers, setting a path for career progression, and making sure that we have a senior leadership that other employees can look to and recognize themselves in. This is about inclusion, as I said. A Black woman is not just Black. She's a woman. She's maybe a person living with a disability. She's an engineer. She's a mother. She's an innovator. And this is about bringing the whole person, the whole self to work and knowing we can feel fulfilled. And that workplace is a safe place to contribute and speak up. So I say this again to this great audience of distinguished Black women. We hear your stories, we see your determination, we feel your resilience, and today we heed your call for action, but above all, we want to walk together with you. Thank you very much, Crystal.
Thank you so much, Nancy. I really appreciate your opening remarks as well. And I want to thank all of our panelists for really setting the stage for our conversation this morning. I think we're really fortunate to have such forward-thinking, progressive leaders who are very committed to making change within their organization. And they've certainly highlighted a number of significant changes to advance the EDI agenda underway in their organizations as we speak. So I want to get into some of the questions, and I want folks to know that because of limited time, we've looked at all of your questions and comments from the breakouts last week, and identified a number of key themes, and a few of the questions that came through were selected. So I'd like to begin by starting with talking about, when we talk about Black women in leadership, and the reality is we know that we have a long way to go in terms of changing the face of all organizations, not just the organizations represented here, but every single organization in this country. We need to do work to change the face of leadership. And we know that the employment equity legislation that I mentioned last week was established way back in 1986. And white women were one of the last designated group members to be added to the employment equity legislation. But as we sit here today in 2020, white women, white able-bodied women are the ones who have advanced the most as a result of employment equity. So over the years, many of us have watched diversity and inclusion initiatives related to women focused on either gender or race. Black women face barriers in advancement because they are women and they are Black. Very rarely do we see a focus on race and gender combined in women's advancement and promotion EDI initiatives. They're usually solely focused on women, not really addressing all the other identities that women bring to the table. Now, while Black women are uniquely challenged by a combination of sexism and racism or other intersecting identities, they are often forced to confront the issue of race before they need to contend to the issue of gender. Now, in a recent report by Lean In, it was found that 49% of Black women feel that their race or ethnicity will make it harder for them to get a raise or a promotion or even a chance to get ahead. Now that 49% is compared to 3% of white women and 11% of women overall. So my question is for any of the panelists, what significant strategies can organizations employ to make Black women's advancement a strategic priority to better enable them to tap into and leverage the talent pool that Black women bring to their organization? So I invite any of our panelists to think about that question. I want to get into how we can strategically employ the advancement of Black women in our organization.
Do you want me to start, Crystal?
Yes, that would be great, Theresa. Thank you.
Yeah, I talked about it, that intersectionality,
Yes.
that we cannot separate ourselves. So from what we are hearing, and we are all involved in that in terms of removing barriers and making opportunities of leadership more accessible. But my argument is that it has to be a little more than just a demographic placement. That if we are to truly move forward, we have to redefine the concept of leadership. And that was my whole argument from the historical perspective and in terms of the current situation as well. Because our current definition of leadership is based on that traditional patriarchal white kind of symbolism. And so we have to change that culture, both in terms of what is leadership, how do we define it, the characteristics of leadership, and also to how we assess it. Because yes, we may be getting in the doorway, but we are held at different standards. And we heard that a lot last week from the Black women leaders. So we have to do both. We have to change the definition of leadership and then link to that, change the assessment of leadership. And recognize, we are moving even at the universities about excellence and diversity, but I also flip it around. Diversity is excellence. And part of that change in that definition of leadership is to incorporate all these things that we bring to the table and not see it as a weakness. You know, that separation of women's reproductive and productive roles, we have to do away with that. You know, so I'll stop there, but I have other things that I could say.
We have time, so if you want to share a little more. Are you sure you want to stop there? Because we're ahead of time, Theresa, so feel free if you'd like to elaborate further.
I have some recommendations for women themselves, but I see Nancy has a hand up, so I'll let her go and I'll come back.
Okay.
Oh, I was happy to continue listening to you, Theresa. Would you rather come back later? Is that it?
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I can jump in.
Yeah.
I really, what you said resonated with me very much. And one thing that we started doing is to review our key leadership competencies. So what is that code for? We defined several years ago in our policies for executives, key behaviors and competencies that we require everybody to demonstrate in an interview, in their career, before we appoint them into the executive ranks of the public service. But we started unpacking this a few months ago, and to understand how there may have been embedded barriers in there. The work is quite advanced, not enough for me to share details with you this morning, but we do recognize that even by defining or looking who defined those behaviors, we're just perpetuating the same behaviors at the table. And it's natural, it's not bad faith, it's not necessarily discrimination. A lot of time it is completely, people are unaware of it, right? We don't see our own paradigms. And it's important to bring in and test those new sets of key leadership competencies, again, co-developing them, not just testing them, but co-developing them with members of the minority groups. But so that may remove a barrier, a strategic approach to remove a barrier from the way we screen candidates for jobs. But we have to go further because we have pools of qualified, equity deserving employees. And yet the pools are not tapped into. And so we need to go further. We need to reserve seats in our leadership development programs. We need to reserve jobs for people. And I know that is not always a popular approach, but when you look back at what happened with waves of Francophones, with waves of women in the workplace, that there had to be this approach, and it's actually an approach that's embedded in the Employment Equity Act that Crystal, you just spoke to. So I believe it takes more than just that assessment. We need to unpack the barriers at every level of the career continuum and make very deliberate decisions to create space for Black women.
Hi, it's Chris. I wouldn't mind sharing a little bit. And Nancy, you talked about being deliberate, and I think you have to be deliberate. And I think about, we've hired Black women in RBC, and I've got examples of that in Atlantic, and we applauded ourselves for it, and we thought we were successful. And then as their careers continued, they left. Their careers weren't fulfilled, and in my view, we failed. And I think part of that goes back to, we need to be very deliberate in supporting individuals, Black women, as they come into the organization, and helping them through mentorships, through sponsorships, so they can be successful, and we can create a path of creating skills that or supporting them with skills that they don't have. They're talented, but we want to see them continue and grow and develop. We need to be deliberate with that, as opposed to saying, we've checked the box and say we've hired Black women, we think they're talented, and we think they'll be successful, and lo and behold, that hasn't proven out, and we need to support them through that process.
Chris, I really appreciate your word deliberate. I love that. You're absolutely right. Leaders, organizations must be deliberate in their intentions of advancing diversity. In my experience, unfortunately, it's been somewhat of an add-on or an afterthought. And we can no longer continue with that frame of reference when we look at equity and diversity. It needs to be deliberate. You know, inclusion, unlike diversity, diversity, as we know, is an act. It's by nature of people showing up to work every day. All organizations are diverse. But inclusion is where organizations struggle because you got to work at it. So that's why I love your word intention, deliberate. How can we be more intentional with strategically infusing the advancement of Black women in our overall equity, diversity, and inclusion plans? Because that's the key. And I love everything that you've all shared, really great initiatives. But how do we hold our organizations accountable where it becomes a strategic part of our work? Not just a program over here and there, but it is embedded in our strategic direction. And then we hold ourselves accountable when we look at measuring how well did we do last year with advancing Black women in our organization. We have a check mark, a benchmark. So can someone talk a little bit about that? Because that's where I think we really need to dig in.
I'd be happy to, Crystal. And I just would like to make one other comment on what was just said. I think why we have not achieved the type of success we've all aspired to is because companies have adopted a diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy, a one-size-fits-all strategy. And, you know, quite frankly, from listening to our employee groups, we know the solutions. You have to be strategic in attacking solutions that are specific to different groups within our team. Yes, gender had been an issue, but the reality is for Black women leaders, they not only face the gender discrimination, but they face racism. It's a fact. And a gender strategy will not solve our problem and be more inclusive. I'm passionate. We've talked to our Indigenous teammates. It's the same thing. Trying to be better from a Black employee and teammate perspective is not going to provide the same strategic solutions as what will work for our Indigenous teammates. It's a fact. And you know, we're talking about strategy, Crystal. We've launched a corporate strategy called Horizon, which is about the business. Well, I can tell you, for the first time that I can remember, a key enabler is a diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy that goes across all of the other tactics. Because if you don't do that, you will not be where you need to be. And I couldn't agree more about being deliberate. I couldn't agree more about inclusion and mentoring. And I couldn't agree more with what I've heard about listening. Like we can't go into this thinking we know what the answers are, because quite frankly, we're learning every day how to be better. But you know, I think that you have a broad strategy, but within that strategy, you've got to have specific approaches to address specific issues. We can have balanced slates for employment. We can do better recruiting at universities. But for each employee group, you've got to have specific support, specific mentoring, specific tactics to really ensure you achieve the goals you're aspiring to. And by the way, you got to have goals. You got to have objectives. You got to be accountable and hold yourself to what you've done to improve your organization.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Vivek. I really appreciate that. Well, that question really generated some good discussion. So thank you all so much. I'm going to move on and I'd like to ask another question. And I think Nancy, Vivek, and Theresa, I think you all may have touched on this in your opening, but we know that inclusion is not just an invitation to the table. but a voice that is heard and one that feels that they belong. It is one thing to give someone a seat at the table, but it's another to give them a voice and an opportunity to work to their full potential. Once Black women leaders get to the table, what supports or resources can be put in place to ensure that they are empowered to work to their full capacity, where their voices are not only invited, they're not only welcomed, they're not only valued, but they're heard. So what resources can we see organizations put into place to ensure that women, Black women, when they arrive to that leadership table, they are empowered and they're not facing barriers to reach their capacity? And we're going to talk about what some of those barriers might be a little later, but I want to know what we can do to ensure that their voices are welcomed, heard, invited, and valued.
Do you want me to start, Crystal?
Yes, please, Theresa. Great.
Well, I would put it the other way around, is if they're valued, if they're recognized, then their voices will be heard, you know, because sometimes we speak, but we are not heard. And that's because we are not valued and the contributions that we are bringing to the table is seen as important. So it goes back, all the things are linked. It's like it's a continuous narrative, because when we do recruitment, we have to attach retention to it, because otherwise we'll be recruiting people into a revolving door. What that retention looks like, we talk about removing structural barriers and providing support and so forth, which is one step, but parallel to that, we have to do a shift in culture. Because as I keep saying, and we have a very good example now in North America and in the US, Civil Rights Act did not result in civil rights. You know, that's a longer process. That's a shift in culture. And we have to work at the cultural aspects of change. And that happens at the institutional level, but also at the smaller levels within units, within departments. And to do that, I also talk about, you know, to fix a drug problem, you first have to admit that you have a problem. Having a policy or a statement is not admitting that you have a problem. It may be a federal law, it may be the political correct thing to do, it may be something coming from administration, right? So that organizations, within organizations and institutions, among the smaller units all the way up, we have to recognize that these things exist and we need to change it. Because what happens, patriarchal and racist ideals is normalized. So we don't, that's where the unconscious bias comes in, you know, is because we have normalized this way of doing things, including assessing Black women, you know, that we don't even realize that we are doing it. And actually it's hard to prove that we are not doing it. So that's another challenge we face. So I say change in structure, change in culture, change in the normalization of stuff and so on is one way of making women's voices really heard, not just opening and closing our mouths or being there as a token. And look at the positions that we are placed in. To a large extent, even within institutions, we are placed in roles as the fixer. You know, we're still the fixers and not the leaders. You know, so it calls a whole change in that understanding as well. And what we do is a lot of times we emphasize, okay, you are coming in, what do you need? How could we mentor you? What about the other side? How are we preparing that organization or unit that we are entering for us? So I'll just stop there for now.
Wow, great, great insight. Thank you so much, Theresa. Yes, Chris, please go ahead.
Well, you know, I'd like to give maybe an example from what Theresa had just shared in terms of changing culture. So part of what we're seeing in new behaviors, new actions, new activities that we're doing within our own market. So I've got each of my regional vice presidents hosting diversity dialogues, and I'm hosting them myself. And we're putting on the table issues and concerns. We've had Black women, we've had Black men talk about their issues. And this issue of being silenced or not being heard has come up multiple times. And I think part of it is, it is, as Theresa said, it's changing the culture from within to make it more acceptable. I can tell you that my level of awareness is much more heightened to ensure that, if it's a Black woman at the table sharing her point of view, that I'm ensuring that her voice is heard, that I create the opportunity to say, let's listen to and let's hear what so-and-so has to say. And that has been a real actual change that I have witnessed. I'll be honest, I was not aware that would have been a concern prior to sharing and having our diversity dialogues. And they have been very helpful for me, as well as not just our leaders, but our entire 1,500 employees within the Atlantic region.
Great, thank you, Chris. And Vivek, please go ahead.
Yeah, I think Theresa, I couldn't agree with you more. This is about culture. We have an organization of 125,000 employees across this country. And until we get the culture where we have great leaders who happen to be South Asian, happen to be Black women, happen to be white, but truly great leaders, and be treated and listened to and given accountability and responsibility in the same way, we will not achieve what we aspire to be. And it does start from the top down, but culture has to go right through the organization. How we hold ourselves accountable at the C-suite has to be how we hold ourselves accountable at the director level, VP level, manager level. One thing we've done, and I'm again, early stages, when we created a diversity, equity, and inclusion council, this was the operations. It was a cross-functional group. The HR team, and we have a wonderful HR team building the strategy. Our role is to pressure test it from an everyday employee perspective, from a business operations perspective, as well as listen to our retail teams on what they need, and particularly employee groups are exceptional young Black women who will be great leaders, are exceptionally young Indigenous employees who will be great leaders, and leaders has to come first, by the way. That's our role. It's our job to activate this across the organization. So in town halls, in business meetings, in every business meeting, are we exhibiting the culture we're trying to build throughout the organization? And if you don't do that, I think it becomes a C-suite almost rhetoric, right? It's not going to bring real change. So we're looking at bringing that, the mirror councils within the organization, so they have the exact same agenda as our council has, into our distribution facilities, into our store network, into our backstage functional areas, so that we're all building the same culture and have the same expectations in how we're going to address these issues, which we do have. And I think unless you take that kind of approach, you'll never get true cultural change, and that's what has to happen.
Great.
Well, I would love to weigh in too on this one. You had a great question there. I think all of us were interested. I'll start from a personal point. My most long-lasting recollection of not being heard myself happened more or less 20 years ago. And it could have been because of race, it could have been age, it could have been sexism. But I do remember repeatedly in an organization making opinions known and not being acknowledged. And then you would have one person representing mainstream leadership, listening to you, asking you a question to better understand, then pitching the idea, and suddenly it's the idea of the century, right? And it happened not just once, but repeatedly. And you have to tell yourself, okay, there's something there. There's something systemic there. So I completely agree with the culture element that all my fellow panelists mentioned. As I said, we're looking at hiring inclusive leaders and assessing that at the appointment stage and not later. Retooling existing leaders to make sure this is changing. If you're chairing a meeting, don't just make sure the Black woman in the corner who's quiet is actually being heard. Seek out her opinion, create the space for her. All that is super important. But you know, like a reality check from me is that this will take time. This is culture, this is behaviors, this is embedded.
Mhm.
Meanwhile, the key, and this is what has worked for me, is to understand as much as we need to learn from equity deserving groups, they and we, I'm part of that, need to observe the codes, le savoir-être, and I don't know what the English is for that, but it's not know-how, it's not the technical competency, it's reading the culture, reading the codes in your own organization. Try to fit in there as much as you can. And as we both move together, the mainstream culture and the creating the space, as we start seeing movement and progress, then it will be easier and you will achieve, you will reach levels where you can in turn start to say, this type of intervention is allowed here and encouraged here, and I want to hear it. And when you look at the composition of senior leaders in our public service, you see that most of the deputies and senior ADMs come from the same occupational groups. So there's a culture, there's a way, there's a code, an unwritten code of how you pitch your idea. People who don't come from those groups don't fit in as easily. And the disaggregated data that we have is allowing us today to do the intersectional analysis to say, you know what, our current mainstream culture and the broad paintbrush composition of the leadership table is actually more of an obstacle to this subgroup of equity community than to maybe another subgroup who has less difficulty because of their career pathways. And that's the importance of data. But my recommendation really is to say, let's try to also equip our equity seeking groups to understand the code, try to fit in that savoir-être again, and meanwhile, let's work on the inclusive leadership.
Fabulous. Thank you all so much for your great responses. If I may, I'd like to drill down on this question a little further and talk about, organizational culture. That's a big piece of this massive undertaking we're trying to achieve by including Black women in leadership and EDI overall. But we know that organizational culture is really the people, the practices and the behaviors. That's what organizational culture is. So when we look at trying to make a culture change to be more inclusive of Black women in leadership, how do we get managers, directors to buy in to ensure that this organizational change is aligned with inclusion and with belonging for Black women in leadership? I'm sure you've heard that quote, culture eats strategy. Now we can have all the strategies we want. We can have the best plans and procedures and directives and programs and initiatives and dialogue circles and all that great stuff. But if we don't have people in our organization who are on board and who buy into the vision of having more Black women in leadership, that's certainly going to hamper our organizational success in shifting the culture. So I'd like if we can just talk a little bit about how do we hold people accountable? And we've talked about that. Accountability is really key. We need everybody on board. Leaders, you all set the stage, but you really rely upon your managers, your middle managers, your HR people, your frontline folks to be on the same page. And if they're not, there goes culture eating up your strategy. So I'd like to just invite anybody to talk a little bit about that accountability piece, because this is really a collaborative effort within the organization. We need everybody on board, and this is where most organizations run into difficulty, getting that buy-in. How do we get the buy-in?
Do you want me to start?
Yes, please, Theresa, go ahead.
Sorry, I started and I kicked the ball all the way along the lines.
Great, it's going well.
Good
Wonderful.
job. We're working as a team.
Yes.
Yeah, accountability. Let's go back to the recruitment, retention, and the culture part of it, right? Because one of the things that is most common now is this concept about you belong. And everybody's adopting this you belong. At first it sounded, it makes sense, but then it didn't sit well with me. And when the more I thought about it is, again, whose voice is this? Whose voice is saying you belong? So it defeats the whole purpose and the concept. And what I've been trying to do to switch the culture at Dalhousie is that when we say that we belong, I like to think that we are a collective of differences. If you're talking about shift in understanding culture, first of all, you have to accept that we have different cultures and that each brings something to it, right? The commonality we share is the commonality of belonging to an institution, not the commonality of a culture, where we are trying to force people to assimilate. And when we are forced to assimilate, what are we assimilating to? A Eurocentric, patriarchal kind of culture. So we have to understand that. And once we understand that, then we go to the transformation of everything else. When I say we're redefining concept of leadership, I have sat on several search committees. We always come up with a list of things that we are looking for, a list of things that we are going to ask. Let us re-examine those things and to see the extent to which this is embracing gender, race, cultural differences in a way that it makes it stronger. For example, even in education and everything else, we use standardized tests, which we all know are culturally biased. And then we try to justify it by saying that the candidate did not meet the requirement. We do the same thing in private and public institutions. Let us re-examine all these criteria that we are using to define what excellence is, what we need, and also how we are assessing folks. What are the tools we are assessing you based on? So we really, really have to change our lens, and then we'll be accountable. The accountability is in the success, because one of the things we have happening as we move through EDI issues is that we are encouraging people to come and talk to us. You know about conscious and unconscious bias. How many times are we defensive when somebody comes to us with an issue? Be it racist, be it sexist, be it the intersectionality. It's difficult to prove because we are trying to prove it within a Eurocentric patriarchal culture. And so we make that person come forward, but there's no outcome of it. And so what is it encouraging for people to come forward with? So these are just some things. I'll pass the ball along to my team.
Would anyone else like to add?
I couldn't agree more with what you said about along the lines of systematic bias with standardized testing and historical, tools that companies use that just are not effective and shouldn't be part of the process. So I look at a couple of things, and this is a short term and long term. I do believe in corporate culture, and I think that matters, but it is a confederation of what we want within the organization and how we want to act. I think that there's a couple of things. One is we'll never be better if we don't have better upfront hiring of senior leaders, so people understand what is important to this organization. If you don't intend to be inclusive and live the diversity, equity, and inclusion elements of our business that are so important to us, there, quite frankly, there's no room for you in our organization. Our CEO has said that. He has said that, you know, making sure we're a more inclusive organization, that Black women leaders have an opportunity to truly to achieve what they want in their career in our organization, and other teammates as well. If you don't live that, there's no room for you in our organization. He's been very clear, and it's every one of our positions. That has never, I've never heard that, you know, till the last little while, and I'm proud of that. I think that ensuring listening and participation, we kind of live that every day. But again, you know, we look at inside our organization and outside our organization, and what I worry about is those systematic barriers that I started the discussion with, or started my points with, are actually outside of our organization as well. I look at our pharmacy business, where we are underrepresented significantly in Black women leaders. It's shameful where that metric is. I've talked to the universities, the pharmacy schools. We need to hire, we need those pharmacists coming into our business. And it gets, and the conversation goes, well, we don't have the applicants. So how do we go deeper into the issue so we can resolve it? Because it's not going to happen in the short term. But if we don't start today, it's never going to be fixed. And those are the kinds of things that you know, we're trying to address. And whether it's internship programs, you've got to look at the whole spectrum of the issue. And there's some things we can get at in the shorter term, but there are some things that will take the longer term. And we need to start now, because more progress has to happen.
Great. I think, Chris, you have your hand up. You go ahead. Over to you, Chris.
Thank you. Thanks, Crystal. I want to try to simplify it a little bit for me. And yes, our CEO heads our Diversity and Inclusion Council, and he speaks from the top. And like Vivek, you know, there's no room for racism in our organization. And we speak, and I think we live diversity and inclusion, and I feel really passionate about that. And yet I can, you know, as Vivek says, we've failed, particularly within, you know, hiring, whether it's just Blacks or Black women, certainly within Atlantic Canada, and I would argue probably through the entire organization. So, notwithstanding that our CEO is saying this is really important, in some ways we're doing a good job, and in some ways we're not. Where I've actually seen it really impactful, and how we're, you know, it's not really accountability for diversity and inclusion at what I call sort of the sort of middle managers and leaders throughout my market. It's storytelling, to me, has been the most impactful. It's having somebody share their story of racism in the organization, somebody sharing their story of not being heard. And people open their eyes and go, I didn't know. I didn't know I was participating. I didn't know whether it was, you know, blatant or just by not being aware. I feel that and we've been doing a lot of storytelling, and it's amazing the change that it is creating, and that sense of accountability for whether you call them directors or managers. And in my world, it could be a branch manager, it could be a leader of a market for small business or financial planners. But that concept of storytelling and having people share their issues of unconscious bias and racism within RBC is a real eye-opener.
Great, thank you, thank you. Nancy, did you have any last comments?
I think my colleagues did a great job maybe one thing, your question was really about culture. And I think that recent neurological research shows that, you have to break this down because culture is a factor of many things that take a long time to shift. So in the public service, we're focusing on mindsets and behaviors. And I think this is about who you appoint in management positions, making sure you're assessing those mindsets and behaviors from the get-go and with new lenses, like Theresa said. And in terms of behaviors, you have to be very strict. You have to let your expectations of behavior known, and you have to assess them and include that in every single feedback. We are comfortable giving feedback on the contents of the job. We have to give more feedback on the behaviors. Assessing accountability and basing accountability on the numbers alone will not succeed. Especially when you look at big organizations where one manager may have a rather limited scope of control. And therefore, if you want to wait until each manager achieves a number of representation, a percentage, it may take a long, long time. So I think mindsets and behaviors are really key if you want to shift the culture. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Crystal, could I add one more point, if you don't mind?
Yes, go ahead. Absolutely.
One thing that Theresa said also that I think is, it's been a true finding in our organization, there has to be a path of escalation. We've heard from a number of our Black women teammates who have said, when we did these listening sessions, far and away, one of the biggest issues was when I had an issue, I had nowhere to go, no way to escalate. And it's not a safe place, it's actually a brave place. And that's one thing that we're addressing right now. And it's not an easy answer. While it's an easy answer that you need to have the escalation process or approach and that in place. How do you do it in a way that protects that employee, rewards the fact for being brave, and gets us what we need to do to address the issue? And I think that's a pretty important piece of this, of any effective plan. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point before we take off for break, because oftentimes, in fact, most times, Black women, Black leaders are the only one. So they are isolated. So to really take that risk to share their voice can be quite detrimental for them. And I think that's really the work that we need to do, is to create the spaces in our workplaces where we can really increase representation ultimately. But in the meantime, when we only have that one, be very mindful that we don't single out that one and expect that one to be the voice, to have all the answers, to be the go-to person, to really wear the weight of Black womanhood on her back on behalf of all Black people, because that's what Black women often face. And to feel that they can stand in their truth in the workplace and be supported. Those are the kinds of things that we need to be thinking about for sure. But I'm just looking at time. This has been phenomenal. It's probably a good time now to pause for a break. And when we come back, we will move into questions from our participants, because I know folks are sending questions in through the chat. So we'll invite some of those questions, as many as we have time for. So it is 11. Why don't we come back at 11:15, okay? So we'll take a 15-minute break and we'll resume 11:15 sharp. Thank you so much, everyone. Okay, hello, everyone. Welcome back. I think we'll get started. Our time is running very quickly this morning. So I want to just continue the conversation as we've been going. It's going really well. But I want to move in now to some of the questions that are coming in through the chat. And I just wanted to set the stage for this next question that's coming up and to the panel. Multiple forms of discrimination, unconscious bias, we've touched on, microaggressions, stereotypes, or blatant racism are common experiences that Black women are facing still in our workplaces. Unfortunately, the reality is that some people within organizations can hold racist beliefs that can be hidden or concealed, yet they still have an impact on Black women and can hamper their opportunities for promotion and advancement. So I wanted to just go to a question that kind of, just when I find it here. So this individual indicates that they noticed in a newspaper article on October 9th, the Herald reported that a former HRM manager who was employed there until her recent retirement posted online racist comments about the decision by the province's watchdog to charge police officers with assaulting a Black teenager. This woman was employed in a management role for 13 years. The question is, what are you doing in your organization to ensure that people who are racist, sexist, homophobic, discriminatory in any way are not doing it as a part of your organization? So I'll invite any of the panelists to address that. What mechanisms do you have in place to really address people who are overtly demonstrating these types of racist behaviors?
It's Crystal, this is a super question,
Yeah.
very difficult question.
Yeah.
I wish I could say this is not happening, but it happens. It is happening. I saw the same article. And the reality of the situation is the long-term goal is to ensure that we have the right filters in place so that people with those points of view do not become managers, do not enter our organization, do not be in senior league. But that's a long-term role. You can't change that on day one. We do have, I look to indicators, and this is not the solution, by the way, but we have very limited tools right now. If we have a number of these sessions on inclusion and other related workshops, I can see pretty quickly what's the participation and who's actually a meaningful participation. That's just an indicator, though. I think in the short term, our only opportunity is to have this escalation approach in place. We got to be able to hear about these situations and then act on them. We have to demonstrate that we will act on them. I wish that there was some way that we could identify these situations. I mean, we look to say, okay, well, has a team become more diverse? I sit in meetings to make sure, and I'll sit there and I'll listen to the conversation to make sure people are engaged and make sure they are being listened to and have an opportunity. But those can be, those can be managed by people that that exhibit and have beliefs that are just not consistent with our organization. Mm-hmm. So ultimately, we have to find a path for impacted employees to be able to tell us and tell us in a way that protects them, and that we then demonstrate we will act.
Great, thank you, Vivek. Yes, Chris, please go ahead.
Yeah, I won't share a whole lot different than what Vivek stated. Unfortunately, I would agree. I would say we are not immune to having individuals in our organization and leaders that may have racist views, and that's extremely unfortunate. Where they get those views, could come from their upbringing, the community they were brought in. I'd say start with learning workshops and hopefully creating awareness, and so you can have them see the full picture and understanding, and hopefully change your views. But that being said, I would go exactly where Vivek said, is that we have ways of, opportunities for employees to speak up, where it's safe to speak up. And I think we have a culture of that within RBC. I mean, they can call, I've got a private line that is strictly there for employees to speak up. It's anonymous. When I host sessions with all employees through Atlantic Canada, and I get questions and answers, and they come in as anonymous. We've got our ombudsman through the organization. You can raise issues. There are multiple, I'm going to say 10 channels where an individual who feels that we've got an individual who's racist, has racist views, is not acting in the way that stands with our values as an organization. That there are opportunities for that to get escalated. And I would say, from my perspective, we wouldn't stand for it. And if any issue or item like the one that you talked about, if we had an employee, as an employee, they have an obligation. They are representing RBC all the time, and social media would be one example of that. And they have to understand that when they are sharing their personal views out in the open, they are representing the RBC at the same time, and that we wouldn't stand for that. And it may result in an individual dismissal or whatever. But I would say that diversity and inclusion is so important as part of our culture and our values, that my belief would be that wouldn't continue. But I do know, there's no question, there are individuals that have those beliefs in my organization, as with many throughout. We've got 80 some odd thousand employees at RBC, and I'd be myopic to understand that doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
So yeah, I think at the university we have a bigger challenge, because in addition we have the concept of freedom of speech,
Mm-hmm.
unions and so on. So it's a much more complex situation. And like everybody else, I always have to keep telling people the university itself is dealing with 200 years of colonialism.
Yes.
That's when we were founded, right? We have over 19,000 students. And then when we add faculty and staff on that, we have a large population. Now, what's the chance that one or more than one person hold these racist and patriarchal views, and who's going to say something, because sometimes they're emboldened by the privilege that they feel comfortable doing this. Sometimes they couch it in social media, right? So what we have at Dalhousie, we use a team approach. We have the Human Rights and Equity Services, we have the HR, we have legal, and also we include deans or directors or chairs, depending on what the situation is. We always reference our core values. Mm-hmm. And we do have a sexual violence policy, a personal harassment and discrimination policy, and we're working on a racialized violence policy. Mm-hmm. So again, I also keep emphasizing that these policies are not going to result in complete transformation, and so this will always come up. So we just have to deal with it head on. Mm-hmm. I've told folks that I've apologized to this university in this 1 year that I've ever apologized in my whole life, because it is what it is, and we have to own up to it. That's the most important thing. We have to own up to it, recognize it, and address it head on the way we can. Now, what happens over time is that it won't be eradicated in 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, but people will get to recognize that you can't just say this.
Yeah. That
there will be something,
yeah.
And the people who, at the other end of it, recognize that we are serious, mm-hmm. that it's no longer normalized within our institutions. Mm-hmm. So it's a slow but firm progress.
But the key is there always must be those consequences.
Yes, our door is always open.
For the federal public service, I would say it's very similar.
Comments. Thank you.
Sorry, can you hear me?
I can hear. Can you say something else? You're kind of fading away a bit, Nancy, on my end.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you. I was saying that in our case, it's very similar to what we just heard. I would put this under 3 simple steps. One is give no excuse. So awareness, education, immediate feedback when we see something that doesn't jive with the values and the ethical code. The second thing is there's no wrong door. So people need to feel that they can come forward to the ombudsman, to the HR, to their union representative, to their manager, etc. And there would be no retaliation of speaking up. So we have a lot of effort to put into this. And the third bucket is taking visible action, but also fair action. So we typically do not, of course, protecting personal information, but we have had situations of employees on social media having inappropriate behavior, and they're identified as a public servant or not. Of course, there's legal implications of freedom of speech, but at the same time, as soon as you can identify an employee to the Federal Public Service, we do have our Code of Values and Ethics. And I say fair action because we also see the other extreme, where a manager is trying to do their manager role of performance management or disciplining an employee, and the employee is very quick to bring forth a racism card or a discrimination card. So fairness and transparency of the process to assess those claims is very important to keep the trust in the system, but also to keep managers who want to be accountable and step up, convinced that they are in the right place and working for the right employer.
Great. Thank you so much, Nancy. I'm going to move on to another question from our chat. And this question, we, Black women, keep hearing about the pipeline issues, but we know talent is not a supply problem. What are succession plans and talent management to establish roles and flow us through the pipeline? Anyone want to begin with that one? And I'll read the question again. We Black women keep hearing about pipeline issues, but we know talent is not a supply problem with Black women. What are succession plans and talent management to establish roles and flow us through the pipeline? So what is in succession and talent management to really move Black women along through the pipeline? Chris, go ahead.
Sure, I can start. I would say right now within RBC, it's a supply problem. We do not have enough women, Black women at RBC, particularly in Atlantic Canada, but I'll speak for the organization as a whole to say it is a supply problem within the organization itself. And I could look at ourselves and say we're part of the problem for that. How we're looking at changing that supply issue is working with organizations, creating internships, and being very deliberate on hiring BIPOC individuals so we can improve the flow and our opportunity to identify candidates that have the skills that will work for RBC. So we're working with a number of organizations, a few that I talked about earlier in my opening comments, for us anyways to improve the aperture, so we're having access to more opportunities for individuals to come in RBC. But if somebody is looking for an opportunity at RBC, by all means, you can send me an email directly, and because by all means, I want to improve the supply, and if you've got the skills and you want to join a good organization, we're hiring.
Fabulous, thank you, Chris. All right, Vivek?
Okay.
I saw your hand, and then Theresa.
Okay. I guess there's a couple of different aspects to this question. First and foremost, the supply issue, unfortunately, is a challenge for us as well. And we have to be better at recruiting and retaining, and we have specific strategies around that. A big part of it is partnering with external organizations, as Chris said. And program that I've talked to Rustam about, you know, to me, I get excited by that because there's real opportunities to create a pipeline. And there are other opportunities that we're looking at as well. But the succession planning, I think, is it's a great question, and it's a great thing to discuss. While I've said we've been very early in a lot of our work, I feel pretty good about our succession planning. We've mapped almost every role in the organization, especially the senior roles, to understand what that 2-year, 3-year, 5-year plan looks like. And quite frankly, we've said this is what we want to be at certain stages of the evolution of that plan. And we know where we have significant pipeline gaps. The opportunity now is we can try to address it now so that we will be a better organization into the future. I'm really pleased that our accountability for succession is actually the same person who is accountable for our diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy. So it's linked together. It just, for the first time, you know, or not for the first time, but I feel like there's a plan. I feel in the long term, we'll be a much better organization, especially with respect to having Black women leadership positions in place, or not positions, Black women leaders in executive positions. But it's what we do in the short term, which is a little more tactical. But on the successions, I like the way we've mapped every position, and that's going even down to our store leadership position. So up and down and across.
Great, thank you. And Theresa, I know you had a comment as well.
Yeah, I would say there's a real pipeline and there's an imaginary pipeline. The real pipeline is linked to the structural barriers that underrepresented groups have had. So I'm not denying that, but the invisible pipeline is where we use that as an excuse. You know, we don't look in certain places. We don't advertise in certain places. We don't reach out. We don't network enough to identify the people who do qualify to get into our institutions. And then I will keep harping on it since it's Black women's leadership. We really have to redefine some of the criteria that we're using to consider excellence and admissions and what is required and so forth. So I think we have to operate at all levels. We have to operate with the real pipeline and the imaginary pipeline. And for us at the university, we are looking at recruitment and retention, faculty, staff, and administration. We're looking at student access and success, and we are looking at community engagement to help with that pipeline, going into the schools and so forth. So we just can't consistently make the excuse that we don't have enough supply. Let's address that concept of supply.
Yeah, exactly. Wonderful. Thank you so much. I have another more of a comment from one of our participants, and they say, I'm curious about the data collection and analysis, aggregated and disaggregated, that Nancy Chahwan has referenced, which is informing their knowing and work. I think this is particularly important to understand around seeing and hearing about microaggressions, which are sometimes hard for people to report on and get resolved. So Nancy, I'm wondering where this references your sharing regarding data analysis and correction, if you wanted to speak to that comment or add any further elaboration to it.
Yes, of course. Thank you for that question. First of all, I would invite the person who asked the question to go on the Canada.ca website. We have started publishing first ever available data at a very disaggregated level. We got from 2019 research and surveys. And I encourage you to also watch as we publish new data and compare to the benchmark of 2019. That has allowed us to not just do a census of who we are, but also map that information with employee perception, employee experience in the workplace, and start doing developing business intelligence. And what's interesting about it is that we now have think tanks, research, academia getting interested in our data, and they have the capacity, of course, to take this even further and triangulate it with other employers and their own academic research. The IRPP, for example, recently has published their own analysis of our information. I think that we still have a ways to go. And although we from the Treasury Board Secretariat work across the organization, there's also work being done by deputy ministers in their own departments through pulse surveys, through fora, in-person fora, to really identify beyond the 15% of visible minorities have stated that they, 15% of visible minority respondents, of course, to the survey have said that they were victims of harassment and discrimination in the year covered by the survey. Well, beyond that, what was the area of discrimination? What was the area? And of course, race came up first in our national survey. But going down and unpacking that. So in my own organization, it was, I have my information, my data, but it's through the conversation with the members of visible minorities on my team, no presence of leadership or management, directly speaking with employees to understand without fear of stigma, fear of career progression impacts or anything like that, to understand the experience and pinpoint where we need to act first.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Nancy. Would any of our other panelists like to speak to the importance of data collection and analysis that you might be doing currently with your organizations before we move on? Okay. Well, at this point, I'm so grateful. I would just want to thank everyone for your comments and all of your questions. And at this point, I think I'm going to wrap up this very robust conversation. There's so much more that we could discuss. Obviously, this is a very broad, complex subject matter, but I think this was certainly a good beginning. The forum was really about listening and, more importantly, about taking action. So I'd like to ask one last question, if I may, for our panelists. What clear steps will you take within your organization to improve the experience of Black women in leadership? Based upon everything you've heard last week, today's questions and conversation, things that you're doing now, what next steps would you like to take to advance Black women in leadership within your organization? So I'd like if each of our panelists could respond to that question as we close for the day. What are you taking away? What do you want to do?
Well, maybe I could start as usual. I mean, there's so much stuff that we're doing at Dalhousie in terms of creating EDI committees throughout the universities. We're creating the structures, and so that EDI will not just be an initiative or program or project, because those go away. We want sustainable changes, but we understand with the structure has to come the cultural shift, and it has to go all the way down and so forth. And we are building the capacity through educational workshops and so on. But what I want to say in my one little minute or half minute is left, I want to speak to Black women. And I want to say we need to actively support and encourage women like ourselves to become leaders, because sometimes we don't. We are stuck with the patriarchal style that we ourselves adopt. I have known Black women and women of color to vote against their own interests because of the traditional styles of leadership. You know, patriarchy drives fear into us and say, we will take care of you. So beware of that. And if you are contemplating stepping up as a leader, do not second guess your ability to become a leader. Do not second guess ourselves, and be prepared. Be prepared to face gendered racism and discriminatory challenges. Somebody said last week, there are no safe spaces.
Yeah.
Believe me, even at the highest level, there are no safe spaces. So let's work within that understandings. And last but not least, we do not have to be like Black male leaders or white male or female leaders. We just have to be Black female leaders.
Mhm. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Theresa. Well said. Thank you. Who would like to go next? Any volunteers from our panel?
I could. Thank you, Crystal. I've spoken over the last hour and a half, I think, of what we're doing on an organizational basis. So I will answer your last question from a personal perspective. I think it's really investing of my own time, speaking one-on-one, but also in groups with Black women, to really better understand and flesh out their experience, share mine, share what worked for me, mentor those who really want to invest further in their careers, making sure that when I unearth unacceptable practices around them, that I'm addressing it by going directly to my colleague deputy ministers and intervening. And it's that personal attention that we will give to women. I agree with Theresa that there needs to be a personal stance that is taken. Leadership is first of all about credibility and courage, I believe, but it's a personal thing. And there is a space for different leaders in our organization. And we just need to make sure that those who have been able and lucky enough to create that space for themselves, also extend that to others around them. Thank you very much for this conversation.
Thank you so much, Nancy. I appreciate your sharing. I think Chris, you go ahead, and then Vivek, we'll come to you, Vivek, after. Chris, you go ahead.
Thank you. The one action, I think we've got a lot of good activities, that are happening, that are moving forward to create change. But what we haven't done specifically is listen to Black women within the organization, or within Atlantic Canada. And so if I'm going to be tactical, what I'd like to do is host a roundtable of RBC employees, Black women, and listen to them and hear their experiences, the microaggressions, the racism that they've encountered specifically. I've listened to Black employees, but not specifically Black women. And I think I can learn about the specific differences and needs of Black women at RBC, and what could we do, and what can I do specifically to support them. That's the one thing that I'm going to walk away and do, that I believe is very tactical and real. And I feel very privileged that I've been included in this panel of really bright, smart, talented individuals. So thank you for allowing me to share my knowledge with some of you. It's been a learning for me, but I also think it creates accountability for me as well. For me to be on this panel means that I've got to act as well and show up. And Mayanne, if you're still here, I'd love to have an opportunity to meet with you at some point in time after, because why I'm asking Mayanne Francis is because she was very clear and transparent and held me accountable to some of the things that we're not doing as an organization. Mm-hmm. And not that we're all the way there, but it's a good checkpoint to see, are we on the right path? Mm-hmm. And my desire to be a participant today speaks to the desire for me to continue to create change within my organization. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much, Chris. I really appreciate that. And we're going to move on. Vivek, please, you share your last comments to that question.
Sure. And look, I just want to start by saying thank you, Crystal. You've done a phenomenal job, as always. Wonderful panel. True pleasure to meet you, Chris, Theresa, and it's just very fortunate to be here and have a chance to learn from everyone on the panel. I would like to say, I fully intend to continue on with our diversity, equity, and strategy, right? But again, within that strategy, you have to be able to adjust. And I learned some really, really important points today, and things that I think I could take back. One is, I think escalation approach for our Black and women leaders and all employees needs to be in place. We need to be able to hear what issues are continuing to go on and be able to address them. I think that when we look at attraction and retention, and again, I heard the great point, well, if there's a falsehood in the supply issue, I need to make sure our team is looking at that. And are we partnering with the right external organizations to attract and retain the right employee group? I think that was a great point, and so thankful it was brought up. Then lastly, mentorship, and this comes out of the discussion last week as well as this week, and the focus on retaining and growing and developing and ensuring their succession. I want to make sure we are appropriately creating the support network. We've built these inclusion networks, which are focused on different teammates, and I just want to make sure we're really well structured, and everyone has a voice in these networks, and that's something I'm going to go back and do. So I'm glad, I'm a big believer in listening, learning, and then acting, and it was great to listen last week and this week. I learned a whole lot myself, selfishly, and I was able to really, hopefully take some things that I can go and try and help my organization to be better and act and adjust. If we're not doing something that isn't the right thing to do or will not be impactful, then find out how we need to adjust. So again, thank you all so much. It's a true pleasure to meet you all and participate. So thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Theresa. Thank you, Chris and Crystal. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Vivek, and thank you to the entire panel. I think we've been very fortunate today. You've all been really awesome. And I think we've been so fortunate really to have you all as our panelists to bring such wisdom and that real diversity of thought. And you shared a lot, we learned a lot from you. And most importantly, I'm really moved and appreciative of your commitment, because diversity and inclusion really starts at the helm. And having leaders like yourselves representing your organizations, I believe they're certainly in good hands. And I just appreciate your openness, your honesty, and your willingness, and your commitment, which is the only way we're going to move this agenda forward. So thank you all so much. I also want to thank all of our participants who participated in our forum. We really appreciate you being a part of this very important conversation. And thanks so much to all of you for your leadership and showing up. We all have a role to play in moving this work forward, all of us. So please give thought to what you can do to make a difference, to elevate Black women into leadership roles. Now, we will be collecting all of the notes and discussions, and this will all inform the report that will come out of these deliberations over these last two sessions. So I really want to let folks know just to stay tuned as well, because we will also be sending you by email a copy of the finalized report. Now, in the meantime, you will also receive a short survey, because we really want to know what you felt about this forum, what has been your experience, any ideas that you would like to share to bring forward. Your voice is important, so please keep a lookout on your inbox as well for that survey, because we'd appreciate your feedback. So before we do close, a very special heartfelt thank you to Her Honor, the Dr. Mayanne Francis, for her inspiration and her leadership as always. Thank you to Yvonne Atwell, Barbara Manning, Sharon Davis Murdoch, and Cora Tolliver. You sisters showed up and courageously shared your stories, and I cannot thank you enough. Thank you to Kathy Martin, who brought our opening prayer, moving opening prayer in song this morning. Thank you to Minister Diab, who brought opening remarks at the first session. Thank you to all of our facilitators. Without you, we wouldn't have been able to capture all that wonderful data, all those notes from the breakout session. So thank you. Thank you to our presenting sponsor, of course, RBC. We so appreciate your support. Thank you to our co-host, the Atlantic School of Theology and Mount St. Vincent University. Thank you to our supporters, the Mounts Business and Tourism Department and the African Canadian Women in the Public Service Network. And thank you to the Black Women Leadership Forum Committee. Hey, shout out, what would we do without you? Sherry Hodds, Director of AST Leadership and Learning. Dr. Malika Das of Mount St. Vincent University. Louise Adungo of the African Canadian Women in the Public Service of the province of Nova Scotia. Thank you all. And finally, thank you all for joining in this memorable conversation. On a personal note, I just want to say that after listening to our storytellers and Her Honor share their voices, I am hopeful of the possibilities that lie ahead for all of us. And I just want to leave you with a simple little quote by Kimberly Bryant. Kimberly said, anytime you get more than a couple of Black women together, you are creating a very powerful mechanism for change. And I'm really feeling that in my tummy, a real energy for change and movement forward. And I thank you all for bringing us to this space that we're in today. I'm so inspired and moved by all of my sisters and their voices. And I just want to thank you all. Before we do close, I have an announcement that I want to make, and I just want to make sure I get it correctly. So just bear with me. So I just want to let folks know that if you have an opportunity, if you could look out for the Viola Desmond Community Talk Series, which is an initiative by the Delmore Buddy Day Learning Institute and BCC, to be announced. It launches this Sunday, November 8th at 6 p.m. on Eastlink Television. Her Honor, Mayanne Francis, and Dr. Kessa Monroe Anderson will be leading a conversation about Viola Desmond and her inspiration and leadership. So if you have time on Sunday, if you're available, check that out on Eastlink Television. So without further ado, once again, my appreciation and gratitude to everyone for your participation, and have a wonderful weekend, everybody. Bye for now.